Hello YouTube! Part 2 of Noob Learning Pathfinder Actions Edition is here. This time we're covering specialty actions and activities. We're just gonna jump into it, but as always before that, please keep commenting, keep educating me, keep teaching me all the things that I don't understand, because I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all very much. Liking and subscribing also go a very long way in helping me and these videos out, so please keep doing that. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Finger guns. All right, this is weird now. Okay, I'm gonna put these away. We don't need to ever do this again. I'm sorry. Okay, goodbye. Okay, here we go. So we're jumping right into specialty basic actions, which are useful under pretty specific circumstances. We're gonna start with activate an item, which I am going to heavily paraphrase, or else I will be here all day just reading the description. Activate an item. Requirements. You can activate an item with the invested trait only if it's invested by you. And we didn't even get past the requirements before I had no idea what the fuck it was talking about. What was the invested trait? What is it? We're going to fucking research. Oh, this is just attunement, but it's called something different. And it's a little different, actually. It's a little different, but it's cool. Some items can be activated as a reaction or free action. So this is like a magic item thing. Like if you had like a fire sword that you needed to activate in order to turn the fire on, that's what this is. Long activation times. Some items take minutes or hours to activate. The activate an item activity for these items includes a mix of listed activation components, but it's not necessary to break down which one you're providing at a given time. You can't use other actions or reactions while activating such an item, though at the GM's discretion, you might be able to speak a few sentences. Interesting, so the long activation times are kind of like concentrating on a spell. So you can't really do much other than talk while it's happening, if that. As with other activities that will take a long time, these activations have the exploration trait, and you can't activate them in an encounter. If combat breaks out while you're activating one, your activation is disrupted. It specifies that you can't do combat while you're activating an item, but that just triggers something in my DM brain that makes for what I feel like would be a really interesting encounter, where either the players have to protect someone who is activating an item before something happens, or they have to stop someone from activating an item. Either way, I think that would be like a really fun encounter using this mechanic, but that's not what we're here for. Command. This component is a specific utterance you must make in a loud and strong voice. You must be able to speak to provide this component. Envision. This component is a specific image or phenomenon you need to imagine. Interact. This component works like the interact basic action and requires you to use your hands just like with any interact action. Cast a spell. If an item list cast a spell after activate, the activation requires you to use the cast a spell activity to activate the item. This happens when the item replicates a spell. You must have a spellcasting class feature to activate an item with this activation component. The activation components are very spell-like, and they remind me a lot of the 5e spell components, but I think that I like them so much more. You have to command the item to work, or you have to envision it working, or you interact with it. I've always envisioned Gandalf's sort of like, "You shall not pass," as like all three of these things. He's making a command. He is commanding the Balrog that it cannot pass. He is also envisioning, or at least I think he is envisioning, an impassable object that it cannot go through. And he's banging his staff, which isn't really activating an item, but in my head, it's like, activate the item, activate the thing, you know? And on top of that, he's casting a spell, which, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just one giant spell coming from him, but it's, you know, that's the way that I see it, and I think that that's really cool. I like this a whole bunch. Arrest a fall. Reaction. Trigger. You fall. Requirements. You have a fly speed. You attempt an acrobatics check to slow your fall. The DC is typically 15, but it might be higher due to air turbulence or other circumstances. Success. You fall gently, taking no damage from the fall. This seems pretty straightforward, though it's a little different from 5e. It's something that my DM has kind of tried to implement in his own games, but less for creatures that can specifically fly and more for just people falling. I'd be curious to see how this works if you make a flying creature prone. Do they have an opportunity to arrest their fall, or do they just fall like they do in 5e? Either way, I like it. Avert Gaze. Single action. You avert your gaze from danger. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to saves against visual abilities that require you to look at a creature or object, such as Medusa's petrifying gaze. Your gaze remains averted until the start of your next turn. I really like this. One of my least favorite things about certain creatures and creature encounters in 5e is this mechanic. When you're fighting a basilisk or a Medusa in 5e, if you avert your gaze, you are basically just making the fight cumbersome. You have disadvantage on attack rolls, but you won't have to make the wisdom saving throw of a basilisk to turn to stone. You're doing this entire combat at disadvantage, which is just annoying and frustrating and not a fun mechanic. And if you do look, then there's just a cascading effect of eventual, maybe I'll fail, maybe I won't, and then, oh, now I'm paralyzed, oh, now I'm stoned. It's not fun. At least with this, you're just giving yourself a better chance at saving, so the effect still has the potential to go off, but you're also not giving yourself disadvantage, so you're able to attack normally. It all works in tandem to, I think, just tweak these kind of encounters and make them a little bit better. Although I will say, as I have said before and will probably say again and again and again, a +2 as compared to just not making the save at all or advantage or disadvantage is pretty fucking crazy. Burrow, single action. Requirements: you have a burrow speed. You dig your way through dirt, sand, or similar loose material at a rate up to your burrow speed. You can't burrow through rock or other substances denser than dirt unless you have an ability that allows you to do so. This is pretty straightforward. It's just a burrow speed. It's like fly, but with creatures that could do a little digging. Though I will not be reading this aloud, the cast a spell and activate items are extremely similar. Where it does differ is the spell components: material, somatic, verbal, and focus. I really like the components of activating an item significantly more, especially Envision. There's something about Envision, kind of reminds me of Green Lantern's ring, or like you're doing an illusion spell and you just have to imagine what it is. You're envisioning what it is to make it happen. But of course we get the traditional verbal, somatic, material. Though there's the added focus, which I'm pretty sure is just concentration. Disrupted and lost spells. Some abilities and spells can disrupt a spell, causing it to have no effect and be lost. When you lose a spell, you've already expended the spell slot, spent the spell's costs and actions, and used the cast a spell activity. If a spell is disrupted during the sustain a spell action, the spell immediately ends. Disrupting a spell seems pretty straightforward, though for some reason I never thought about disrupting a spell or counterspelling something in 5e that has consumable components. Counterspelling a Revivify is already a heinous enough action, but when you start to realize that not only are you counterspelling someone coming back to life, but you're also killing 300 gold worth of a diamond, I never thought of that. That's like so much more icing on the evil DM cake. Dismiss. Single action. You end one spell effect or magic item effect. This must be an effect you were allowed to dismiss as defined by the spell or item. Dismissal might end the effect entirely, or it might end it for a certain target or targets, depending on the spell or item. Wow! It is wild to me that this is not just a free action. Although I do suppose there are probably some other spells in 5e that I can't think of off the top of my head that require you a bonus action to dismiss. But to sacrifice a whole action in order to dismiss a spell seems pretty crazy when you're comparing, oh cool, I'm gonna turn off this light switch, to I'm running 25 feet. Like, it's a hard thing to compare. And I think that sometimes that's where I lose a little bit of the 3 action rules that Pathfinder has. Although I do like that it specifies you can end it for specific targets as opposed to all targets. I don't know how often that actually comes up. It's never been something that I really think has come up in 5th edition, but I like that idea. Fly. Single action. Requirements: you have a fly speed. You move through the air up to your fly speed. Moving upward, straight up, or diagonally uses the rules for moving through difficult terrain. Yo, what the fuck? Moving up and diagonally up is difficult terrain? I mean, it makes sense, especially when I envision trying to like flap my way upward into the air. It feels sensible, but also punishing at the same time, but not in a bad way, but also not in a good way. You can move straight down 10 feet for every 5 feet of movement you spend. And it works in reverse? You go faster going down? They put a lot of thought into this. If you fly to the ground, you don't take falling damage. You can use an action to fly 0 feet to hover in place. And you have to use an action to maintain the fly? If you're airborne at the end of your turn and you didn't use a fly action this round, you fall. Flying is crazy in 2nd edition Pathfinder. I love it. I love it. It makes so much sense as a creature with wings. I don't know if it makes as much sense if you have like a fly spell cast on you, because that just kind of feels like it's just automatic, but with flapping wings, it feels more action-y. I don't know, I might take that away for fly spells if it's not already specified. Although I do think the concept of like aerial combat and then just going balls to the walls with 3 actions to attack or do spells and stuff, and then just letting yourself fall is awesome. Grab an edge, reaction, trigger. You fall from or past an edge or handhold. Requirements: your hands are not tied behind your back or otherwise restrained. When you fall off or past an edge or other handhold, you can try to grab it, potentially stopping your fall. Immediately love that this exists as a reaction, though in most instances when I'm DMing and someone is about to fall, this is just an automatic fail state in multiple fail states that I implement. If you're about to fall off a ledge, you make a dexterity saving throw in order to grab the ledge. And even then, if you fail grabbing the ledge, I still give 1 extra opportunity just to make sure that you're not falling to your death, because usually that's what happens. Otherwise, if it's not that big of a fall, fuck them, they're going down. This sort of ideology of multiple fail states came with time and experience and a lot of Matt Colville videos. So the fact that they build this in for people who are not experienced, I love it. You must succeed at a reflex save, usually at the climb DC. If you grab the edge or handhold, you can then climb up using athletics. Critical success: you grab the edge or handhold, whether or not you have a hand free, typically by using a suitable held item to catch yourself. Catching a battle axe on a ledge, for example. You still take damage from the distance fallen so far, but you treat the fall as though it were 30 feet shorter. Also, the different success states are really cool. I never imagined someone having to have their hands free or not having their hands free and just like, huh, I'm caught on by my X, but I'll make it back up. I don't know what that accent was, but like the idea that I'm envisioning, like that's really cool. And then like swinging yourself up, it's very like Lara Croft, Nathan Drake, Cal Kestis sort of climbing around and doing shit and things going poorly. I like it. Success: if you have at least 1 hand free, you grab the edge or handhold, stopping your fall. You still take damage from the distance fallen so far, but you treat the fall as though it were 20 feet shorter. If you have no hands free, you continue to fall as if you had failed the check. Critical failure: you continue to fall, and if you fall in 20 feet or more before you use this reaction, you take 10 bludgeoning damage from the impact for every 20 feet fall. 10 extra damage for every 20 feet on a critical fail? That's savage. Mount, single action. Requirements: you are adjacent to a creature that is at least 1 size larger than you and is willing to be your mount. You move onto the creature and ride. If you're already mounted, you can instead use this action to dismount, moving off the mount into a space adjacent to it. This is pretty self-explanatory and straightforward, though I think in the world of D&D it's a little bit more forgiving. I think that's just how their movement plays into the action economy. I think everything related to movement in 5th edition is simpler and far less punishing. Point out, single action. Requirements: a creature is undetected by 1 or more of your allies but isn't undetected to you. You indicate a creature that you can see to 1 or more of your allies, gesturing in a direction and describing the distance verbally. That creature is hidden to your allies rather than undetected. This works only for allies who can see and are in a position where they could potentially detect the target. If your allies can't hear or understand you, they must succeed at a perception check against the creature's stealth DC, or they misunderstand and believe the target is in a different location. Oh, this is cool. I've been in many situations where something like this occurs, and it's just sort of like a gimme to the other players, but I like that it gives an actual cost to players to point something out. I'm thinking of this along the lines of someone watching on a night's rest and seeing someone sneak in and come through and having to like point out and wake up other people. I imagine that this is more of a combat sort of a situation. Either way, I like that there is a cost to this so that doing something stealthily costs the player something even if they overcome it. Also, just being able to see something that your allies can't and pointing it out feels like calling in an artillery strike type of a situation, and I'm a big fan. I also love that it goes for like stealth DC as opposed to like a performance check or something in order to be able to accurately point out what it is you see. Honestly, the rules of visibility and the different states of visibility in Pathfinder and just how specific and nuanced it is one of my favorite parts of Pathfinder that I've read so far. Raise a shield, single action. Requirements: you are wearing a shield. You position your shield to protect yourself. When you have raised a shield, you gain its listed circumstance bonus to AC. Your shield remains raised until the start of your next turn. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of this, but I also think that I am. I like that it's an activatable. It almost feels a little bit more gamified, but in a good way. But I don't like that it's activatable because in 5th edition, you just have a shield and it always counts as a +2 to your AC. If it has the same downsides as a 5th edition shield, then I think it's worse. Specifically the downsides being unable to use this second hand because it's occupying a shield. But if it doesn't and it's just there and you have to specifically raise it for it to work, and so this hand is technically free, then I like it way better. Sustain a spell, single action. You have at least one spell active with a sustained duration and you are not fatigued. Okay, it's been a minute. I need to call back on what fatigued is. Oh yeah, no, this is just exhaustion, but it's different. That's crazy though. You can't sustain a spell while you're fatigued. I imagine sustaining a spell is concentrating on a spell. So if you're like hold person and you have to concentrate for that minute, or if you're banishing and you have to concentrate for that minute, you can't be fatigued and do that. That makes fatigue extraordinarily powerful. Choose one spell with a sustained duration you have an effect. The duration of that spell continues until the end of your next turn. Some spells might have slightly different or expanded effects if you sustain them. Sustaining a spell for more than 10 minutes, 100 rounds, ends the spell and makes you fatigued unless the spell lists a different maximum duration, such as sustained up to 1 minute or sustained up to 1 hour. If your sustain a spell action is disrupted, the spell immediately ends. So does that mean if the spell says sustained up to 1 minute and you sustain the full minute, do you then get fatigued, or is it only after 10 minutes that the fatigue comes? Or is it just any time a spell says sustained up to X minutes and you go to the full X minutes? What happens if it's sustained up to 1 hour and you go 30 minutes? Is that the same? Is it different? I like what it means for the flavor of magic. But the way that it's worded also leaves a lot of wiggle room for kind of being a douchebag. So if you're sustaining a spell for 9 minutes and 54 seconds, you don't get fatigued. But if you do that 1 extra round, fatigue. It feels very easy to capitalize on something like this. I almost would want to like implement some sort of saving throw in the realm before the fatigue cap and then just have it be automatic after. So rather than playing with it, you have to commit. Activities. An activity typically involves using multiple actions to create an effect greater than you can produce with a single action, or combining multiple single actions to produce an effect that's different from merely the sum of those actions. In some cases, usually when spellcasting, an activity can consist of only one action, one reaction, or even one free act. An activity might cause you to use specific actions within it. You don't have to spend additional actions to perform them. They're already factored into the activity's required actions. You have to spend all of the actions of an activity at once to gain its effect. In an encounter, this means you must complete it during your turn. If an activity gets interrupted or disrupted in an encounter, you lose all actions you committed to it. I like this from what I can understand, but I don't think that I fully grasp it. It feels like you're using all of your action economy to Voltron into like one bigger mega action. But like, what the fuck's a bigger action? It almost sounds like a really fun objective in combat. I've done something similar like this with spells where you need to pump your spell points or spell slots into something at a rate that's much higher than what is normal so that you can complete an objective. But I like the idea of doing it with actions because it ties up things and makes combat a little bit more thoughtful. Hey there, Future Jax here, and I just reread the activities section, and I'm now realizing that I was completely and absolutely wrong about everything that I thought I had read. An activity is literally just Clan's Edge, where it's 3 actions, but it's under the guise of 2 actions. It's a feature that allows you to do 3 actions for the cost of 2. I'm dumb. Hello, thank you, goodbye. Exploration and downtime activities. Outside of encounters, activities can take minutes, hours, or even days. You can often do other things off and on as you carry out these activities, provided they aren't significant activities of their own. For instance, if you're repairing an item, you might move around to stretch your legs or have a brief discussion, but you couldn't also decipher writing at the same time. If an activity that occurs outside of an encounter is interrupted or disrupted, you usually lose the time you put in, but no additional time beyond that. This is the first rule, at least in actions, where I have just out loud said, this is kind of dumb. For the most part, it seems pretty in parity with what happens in 5th edition. However, the way that disruption works, I don't believe makes sense in the way that I understand what I've read. Makes sense that you can have your activities disrupted, but it doesn't make sense that you can lose the time you put in on those activities. If you're repairing a blade and you're at the part where you're sharpening it and someone comes and interrupts your time, the blade doesn't just magically lose its sharpening. So why would you lose the time that you've put in? I get that it makes sense to bring it all into a bigger picture, but logically it doesn't make any sense to me. I think I would just work from an hour's perspective and say, hey, you you wanted to do this for 8 hours, but really you only got 4 hours of work in. So now you need 12 more hours to complete this activity as opposed to the 16 that you needed before. And because of the way that it's written and the way that I understand it, it almost feels like the DM has to make something up to flavor why you lost all that progress. Frank came in to talk to you, and while he was talking to you, you thought you could keep doing your thing and keep sharpening the blade, but then you cut your fucking hand off. So you had to go and get a fucking healer to attach it back to itself, and the blood was corrosive and dulled the blade. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense, okay? It's stupid. It doesn't, I don't like it. I don't like it. Everything else is cool. It's logical, I get it. This is dumb. Holy shit, we did it! And that was a lot of fucking actions. But that's all of it. The more I do these, the easier they get, from writing to recording to editing. So we're gonna keep these videos coming until I know literally everything about Pathfinder. But before then, if they haven't already come out, I'm also going to be making some videos back in the D&D world, and as well as some anime things that I am so very excited to start working on. Up next in the Pathfinder Noob videos, I'm doing skills, but I'm also recording this probably a long time before it actually gets released, so there could be some comments that dictate and change the way that this is. And if you would like to have the power to dictate where I go, all you have to do is leave a comment saying, Jack, you want to do spells? Go do spells. Look at them, read them, learn them, love them, and I will. I just need one of you to comment telling me to do spells so that I can finally dive in, because that's what got me wanting to jump into Pathfinder in the first place. The spells are great, but that's it. We have done it. Actions are down, conditions are down, dwarves are down. We are burning through it. I'm very, very excited. So in the meantime, maybe you missed one of the other videos. Here's a playlist of all of them. Or here's just another video from my channel that YouTube wants to recommend to you. And this is my face, which is covered by a fake version of my face. And if you click it, I think it makes you subscribe. I don't know if it does, but if it doesn't, you should subscribe. Okay, all right, bye. Bye, 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 bye.